Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome back to the USA Global TV Network. My name is Dr. Danielle Lord, and I am the hostess of the Compassion Project, where we examine, explore, unpack institutionalized trauma to break through the pain and frustration so that we can begin to heal and spark a compassion evolution. And yes, I said evolution, not a revolution, because we want this to be long-term and sustained. So I am so happy to introduce my guest today, Dr. Jennie Byrne, MD, Ph.D., as my husband would say, doctor, an author of Moral Injury, and I can't wait to dive into this topic with you. So please welcome to the show, Dr. Byrne.
Hey,
Dr.
thank
Jennie,
you.
Dr. Byrne.
Dr. Byrne, you can call me whatever. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, fantastic. So I always find reading bios to be really impersonal. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to your book, Moral Injury, and from the heart and from that space of energy and love and compassion.
Sure. So my name is Dr. Jennie Byrne. I'm from Pennsylvania originally and trained as a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist. So that's the doctor part. And really just became fascinated with brain and behavior when I was in college, but I didn't know I wanted to be a doctor when I grew up. I actually was a musician. That was my first entry into college. So my path and my career has really led me all over brain and behavior. So some of the things in the path have included solopreneuring, opening my own practice, growing it, and selling it for psychiatry where I live in North Carolina. I worked with Medicaid across the state of North Carolina. I've had national health executive roles, running large groups of clinicians across the country, doing value-based care, which is a really interesting topic.
Yes.
And in the last couple years, really focusing more on earlier stage companies or companies who are looking to, like you said, evolve quickly. So kind of speed to clinical quality. So I'll help companies do pivots or evolutions. And I still practice. I still have a small psychiatry practice where I typically take care of professionals or physicians. And the book, Moral Injury, which is behind me there, is my second book. I was really passionate about this topic because I live and breathe healthcare. I talk to clinicians every day who are in the field, in training, executives. And what I found is everybody was saying the same thing, and it was quite distressing to me. Everybody was saying behind closed doors, and I'm a shrink, so people just tell me things. They were saying, if I could just get enough money, I'd be out of here. And this is even the CEOs and the executives who you would never guess. And I also take care of physicians and clinicians. And I remember many in my practice who were superficially superstars and looked amazing, but they'd be sitting in my office saying they were thinking to end their lives. So there's a profound disconnect. And I think people have been talking about burnout for a long time, but it's worse than they think when it comes to healthcare. And burnout to me just never really captured what I was feeling or what others were telling me. So that's when I dug in and started researching and had a passion project to write this book and publish it in 4 months, which was
Wow.
Very fast. I would not recommend anyone listening to write and publish a book in 4 months, but I did it. So forgive if there are any typos in there. But that's kind of how the book came to be.
Wow. Yeah, 4 months. That is a really long time. I think I did my most recent one in 7. So wow, 4 months that's lightning speed. So in our original conversation, we talked about the importance of words and how burnout is just not working. And so led you down this topic of moral injury, which I think is so much more profound. To me, when I hear burnout, it almost feels like it's oh, you're suffering. Oh, you have burnout. Ooh, oh, that's stay away, cooties, right? It almost feels like it's something that's your fault if you have burnout, right? You caught a disease kind of thing. Whereas moral injury, I think, is so much more profound. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. The way I would recommend people thinking about it, and this has even evolved a little bit since I wrote the book, is if you can imagine, I don't have a whiteboard, I would draw it here for you, but kind of a Venn diagram of 3 circles that are intersecting. And one of the circles is burnout, the other circle is moral injury, and the third circle is PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. So the reason it's important to know the difference, and they definitely intersect, which is why I say it's a Venn diagram, is because the healing or the solution is different for all 3. And so the lexicon and the words you use matter, because otherwise you might be taking the wrong steps to get better. So the definitions I recommend are, when you think about burnout, thinking about a physiological state of your body and mind where you're physiologically depleted. So that could either be physically your body is depleted of energy, or it could be mentally and psychologically that you feel depleted. The moral injury, on the other hand, which comes to us from the military, that's the definition I use, has 3 parts. The first part is that you are either part of something, you do something, you're witnessing something that goes against your values, whether those are personal, family, religious, professional, or otherwise. The second thing is that it is ordered or condoned by somebody superior to you, where you work. Yep. And then third, that the stakes are high. So in healthcare, the military, I think it's easier to understand high stakes, but in other corporate settings, I've worked in corporate settings, and my husband had an entire career in corporate settings. The stakes may feel high for very little things. Yeah. You know, like an aggressive email or a meeting, or like the stakes can feel very high, even if realistically, you know, they're not life or death, but they feel that way.
Sure.
So that's moral injury. And then post-traumatic stress disorder is something that happens actually in your brain and body after a trauma. And not everybody who has a trauma has PTSD. Sure. But we know a good amount of that from kind of the neuroscience and the psychiatry literature. So those are the difference between the 3. And I think most people are using burnout to kind of describe all of it right now.
Yeah, it's become kind of a ubiquitous phrase, hasn't it? So I love that you talked us through the definitions of all 3. And I certainly see all 3 in the workforce all around us. And I think, you know, even the definition of trauma in the way that I use it from a non-clinical experience is that it is repeated and prolonged in instances of repeated interpersonal occurrences. So even that aggressive email that's coming through, you know, if it's one after another, if you're in a toxic culture, certainly I believe that can be trauma as well for folks. And so that's why I say we're in this kind of state of institutionalized trauma, because it's coming at us from so many different angles. But back to healthcare, definitely see that moral injury piece as you defined it in the way that you did. And I think it extends beyond the physicians as well, but I think a lot of our nurses experience the same type of event when they come into practice. And we still hear that mantra of nurses eat their young. And this is what I had to experience. And so you're going to have to experience it as well. And I think it really highlights the fact that we're just in this negative downward spiral of just negativity, and it sparks an energy that it's hard to move away from that. So
yeah, well, first of all, I talk about physicians a lot because I'm a physician. So obviously I can empathize, I think, the most deeply personally with physicians.
yes.
But normally when I talk about healthcare, I like the word clinicians. So that's doctors, nurses, physical therapists, physician assistants, occupational therapists, pharmacists. There's a whole group of people who heal, and I like to call them. So I talk about physicians often because that's who I am, but most of this you said with nurses, 100%. And I think what's interesting, the nuance is there's always been a culture in healthcare of this kind of you learn the hard way, right? Like you learn, like you said. But the difference is when you interview clinicians now who are my generation or above, a little bit more, experienced, seasoned, they'll say, yeah, but, I signed up for that. What's happening now is different. Because back then, sure, it was hard. We knew it was going to be hard. We expected that, but that's what we signed up for. We knew it was going to be that way. But this is different. What I'm feeling today is different. And the reason I'm ready to leave nursing forever, which is really sad, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
When I talk to folks or interview them, the reason I'm leaving now is it is different. It is not just that it is hard work or a difficult job. Something is different. I don't feel the same. Something is wrong. I feel wrong inside. My supervisors feel wrong. Everybody feels wrong, and none of us feel like we can do anything about it. And I have to leave because if I don't leave, it's just eating my soul. And I just can't do it anymore. And I'm going to go. And that's what I'm hearing. So it's not so much like hard work or long hours.
Right.
It's really something different just feels wrong. And most people can't articulate what it is. They say, I just feel wrong. And that's sometimes why they say burnout, because that's the word that other people use. And so they say, well, I guess this is burnout.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, and that's fascinating. As I was listening to you, I was wondering if anyone has actually been able to articulate what it is that they're feeling. And I wonder if it is that disparity between their personal values and what they're experiencing in the workplace. I wonder, do you see a connection? So you mentioned value-based care, and I think patient-centered care always kind of felt yucky to me when I sat around the table and we had those conversations about patient-centered care. But do you think there's any connection between that kind of the healthcare becoming more of a business rather than everything being focused on caring for the patient as far as the clinicians are concerned, or what you're hearing? Or do you think there's any connection?
500%. So without a fail, every single clinician I've interviewed or talked to says some version of the same thing, which is, I feel like a cog in a machine. I did not sign up for that. That's not why I did this. That's not why I trained. I did not sign up to be a robot and be a cog in a machine. So people do articulate that pretty clearly over and over again.
Yeah, but I remember reading that as a passage in your book around the same from one of your interviewees, participants.
But sometimes it's like, I feel like this, but then they don't know why they feel like a cog in a machine. And so then that leads to these common narratives of like, well, the clinicians are good and the administrators are bad, or the executives are bad, and this kind of us versus them mentality, which unfortunately I think the media and some others who write on this topic are promoting that as a worldview, which is, I think, way, way, way overly simplistic, black and white. And I know a lot of executives. I was an executive. I can tell you I'm the same person I was, when I saw patients every day, all day, when I was an executive to today. When I see patients, I'm the same person. I'm not good or evil. So this narrative around us versus them, that's where most people jump to is the next, like, I feel this way. I feel like a cog in a machine. It's because the CEOs are greedy and the corporate administrators are like robots, so the narrative very quickly jumps to that. And I think it's beyond counterproductive. It's actually creating more injury. And when you talk to the
agreed.
managers and the executives behind closed doors, sometimes they're the ones that are actually suffering the worst because they feel caught in the middle. And they're like, I'm trying to take care of my clinicians. I'm in this system. I feel terrible. What am I supposed to do? How do I go and tell them this? How I feel powerless. And actually the executives sometimes are suffering more than the frontline people, but they won't say it because they're trying to be a leader. They're trying to be stoic. They're trying to make the best of the situation. But I can tell you, sometimes they're actually suffering worse.
Wow, fascinating. It really gives whole new meaning to that phrase, it's lonely at the top, right? Where who do you talk to? Who's in your small circle where you can talk and share these things? I certainly ran across some of these same instances when I was working with physicians who had transitioned from clinician to leader. And they talked about the loss of camaraderie between their physician group. And they felt that they didn't really fit in with the executives. So there's definitely a loss from that perspective as well. So yeah, I think it's all around us. And it's sad because it is really impacting the quality of healthcare that our folks are receiving.
Well, we're all patients.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a patient. I'm a parent. I go to the kids. I have an aging parents. I help them with their health care. Like, we're all patients.
Yeah.
And we all know what it feels like to go into a room or a video call with a clinician who is not feeling good.
Absolutely.
We all know what that's like. That doesn't feel healing. So I think also the dichotomy between administrator, clinician, patient. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all patients. So we should all care about this.
Absolutely.
It really,
absolutely.
And I'm sure everybody listening has some health thing they've had to deal with, or someone in their family or something. And you've probably had good experiences and bad experiences, but we should all care about this. I mean, this is our world. And unless you want to be taken care of by robots, we should all care about this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I agree completely. So you brought up an interesting element introducing the idea of robots. How do you say AI interplay in this?
I like to say robots. So the reason I say robots is because it's a lighter term, and it kind of makes people smile a little bit and maybe brings back some images of like,
the Jetsons.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's my generation, right? The Jetsons, or like the friendly robot. And I think AI, automation, algorithms, machine learning, I mean, they're all kind of, in my mind, robots. And the devil is in the detail. Robots can help you, robots can hurt you. Everybody's like, oh, well, what about the Terminator? Robots can hurt you. Yep, they can. But at least right now, we're the ones designing the robots. So I see robots as better at certain tasks than humans, and I see humans better at some tasks than robots. And that may change over time, who's better at what. But there is this really interesting neuroscience literature emerging about how humans heal one another, and the relationship between the healer and the person seeking healing actually generates brain waves that synchronize between them. And it doesn't have to be in person, by the way. It can be video or even text. But there is this synchronization that happens, and people are healed by the human to human part. Yes. So that's not the only way we heal. There's a place for medicine and all the other things too. But if we have robots doing the healing, I personally don't believe that the people will feel healed. I don't think they will. That's what science shows us. I mean, we have bodies that have been honed over, however many thousand years to heal each other and be social creatures.
Yeah.
So I just don't buy it that robots can do everything. But hey, robots are way better at like doing a literature search than me. I'd have to go. I mean, it's not like the old days where I go to the library and there were only so many journals. I mean, there's no way any human being can keep up with the literature.
Yeah.
So I'd much rather have the robot go and search for me than spend, 10 hours trying to research a topic. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right. It's an ethical component or an ethical consideration that has to happen. And I have not seen the research myself, but I have heard through other circles that about the brain waves and that connection, the human to human. And I fully believe that that is the case. And, there's no AI, a logarithm that's going to come out and hug you. Even if it does, it might not feel the same. But yeah, I really think there's something to that. We've got to keep the humans in the compassion space of healing. So, but let's transition a bit because I know you have another book. I'm so sorry the name escapes me. I meant to write it down.
That one,
Work Smarter.
Can't see that one. Yeah, that one's over here too. Work Smart. That one's over there.
Work Smart. Okay. And that looks at the organization more globally, kind of a bit outside of healthcare. Of course, healthcare has become an organization in and of itself. Thank you, Dr. Jacqueline, for pulling that up. How do you see this kind of overlaying moral injury extending beyond the system of healthcare into organizations at large?
So I wrote this book really in the spirit of sharing what I learned during the pandemic. So the first book, Work Smart, was me, like many of you listening, who used to always go to an office or a clinic, and all of a sudden having to figure out how to, at that time I was leading a national company from my office here, and I'd never done that before, and I was trying to figure it out, and I didn't find good answers that were there quick enough. Like, I needed answers immediately. So I started researching myself. Again, I'm a brain and behavior specialist, so that's the kind of research I did about how to work virtually or hybrid, or kind of the new ways of working is what I call it. And the first book is really Work Smart shares what I learned. So a lot of what I learned had to do with how we communicate and the difference between the different kinds of communication, like text, audio, video, in person. How does our brain process different types of information, and how would somebody like me, a leader trying to lead a group of people in a virtual or hybrid space, how can I use that knowledge to be a better leader and communicate and help people feel better at work? And then I was also I learned a lot about some of the neuroscience of like Zoom fatigue, or some of the other things that were really crushing at that time. I think still now, honestly. I just read some article that said white collar work has become back-to-back meetings all day, every day for everybody. And that, I can tell you, is like really bad for your brain.
Yes.
So I got into so I kind of went into the neuroscience about meetings and Zoom and video, and then very practically, well, how do you use all these tools to build culture and bring people together, as opposed to swamping them in a never-ending, like I think you said early, like death by 1,000 cuts emails.
Yeah.
And then I researched a little bit about companies that are a little bit ahead of their time, and how when it looks good and it looks right, what does it look like, and some examples of like so that was the first book. And so it ties closely into the topic of burnout and so forth, because if you don't work smart, you will get burned out. You may have moral injury, and you may even have PTSD. And
so, I think all three are absolutely possible.
So it's not unique. Like I said at the beginning, it's not unique to healthcare. I think corporate America is all suffering from some of the same stuff.
Yes.
And again, I think the answers are sometimes not as hard as we think they are. And I see people and companies coming up with these really expensive, complicated plans, and they spend all this money. And, it's like, sometimes it's literally like having some hard conversations that take 5 minutes. And it's just the discomfort and the lack of psychological EQ or help or mentoring, which a coach can be really helpful for in some cases. Or, I trained as a psychotherapist. I use all my training from psychotherapy as a corporate leader. And honestly, that was probably the most important skill set I had, because I understood how to work with people and bring them along, or make them feel like they were part of something. So the first book was really about like me figuring out how do I do this thing, and then sharing what I learned. And then the second book was really more about like what is happening because people are not working smarter, and really like this is an urgent crisis that we can't ignore, especially in healthcare, because if we ignore it, we're going to be in deep, deep trouble.
Yeah, I so agree. There was so much in there, what you said. And I know from my PhD is in leadership theory, and there's a ton of psychology that's in that. And, people don't give a lot of credence to how important that understanding of some of that psychological framework is in terms of connecting with people. But what you said about the back-to-back meetings, it reminds me of, when we all sent home to work from home for 2 weeks, right? And we had managers who were demanding to know what people were doing every hour on the hour and how they were staying busy and productive. And I thought, my gosh, we've just like shut down the entire world. And you want to know how people are staying busy and productive every hour?
Well, but that's, if you go kind of the next level of psychology, they were doing that because they were fearful.
Certainly.
They were fearful because the world was in fear, but they were also fearful that everything they knew about how to run a business had suddenly been pulled out from under them. And they were relying on a fear-based mindset of managing by time. And time has been the predominant American proxy for all sorts of things since the Ford factory days, which is when it started 100 years ago. So
Taylorism.
So managing by time is a proxy for managing for output or quality. But if anybody, I'm sure everybody listening has either had a manager who managed them by time versus quality or output. And we all know if you're managed on time, you find all sorts of ways to consciously or subconsciously look like you're really busy.
Yes.
But I've literally known executives who tell me I pushed my mouse around because they were counting my clicks.
Gosh.
So it's a proxy. Management by time is a proxy. And when you understand where that comes from, again, you understand the history of Ford and how we got where we are in corporate culture. You understand and you're like, oh, well, it didn't used to be that way. I'm just assuming it has to be that way. The 9 to 5 is just totally made up. Somebody just made that up 100 years ago. And now we all think we have to be working 9 to 5, which is ridiculous. Right? Most human brains and bodies don't function all at the same efficiency from 9 to 5 Monday through. It's absurd, actually. So
true.
I think once again, I like to try to make it a little funny. When you go back and you look at the history, you can see how ridiculous it is. And I, in the first book, wrote about the parody movies, right? So there was the movie Office Space. I don't know if you like that movie, or the series The Office. And those were hugely popular, and they were parodies of corporate America. And when you have a parody, that means that everybody knows deep down this is ridiculous. But we've all fallen in this trap of just saying, well, that's just the way it's got to be, right? But who says so? Like, that was just made up. So the first book also kind of tries to challenge those assumptions, and they're in healthcare too.
I love that.
A lot of the assumptions are in healthcare too.
Yeah, I love that, the challenging it. And I see the same thing in employee engagement, right? And I know you and I had a long conversation about employee engagement, but I see the exact same thing. It's like, oh, everybody's disengaged, so we're going to have a party. And somehow throwing money at it in that same concept that you were talking about earlier is somehow supposed to fix the problem, rather than just, how about if we just treat our employees like humans? How about if we just respect them and be kind to them? That would probably go far further than throwing a party one time that you're going to forget about pretty quickly.
If you're a human being who loves parties and that's what matters most to you in the world, maybe that party is the right answer. But odds are, like, that's not for everybody.
Short half-life on those.
And we talked, I know our last conversation was about engagement. The other thing I would challenge people listening, engagement is a state of cognition. The only way you truly can know if someone is engaged is to put electrodes on their head and look at their EEG. So all the other metrics of engagement are proxies. So people responding to a newsletter, people filling out a survey, people, whatever, there's huge companies that do this, right, all the time. That is not engagement. That is a proxy measure for engagement. So again, the lexicon to me matters because I can write anything on a survey. It can be total BS. I can be totally disengaged and ready to walk out the door, but I know my boss somehow is going to know that's me. So I may write something totally it's a lie. Right. And so I always urge people to stop surveying because I don't think it's valuable and it burns a lot of time and energy that could be used in a more strategic way. But people like surveys because they're familiar and they seem like a good thing. And again, we just assume they work. But I would challenge people, leaders especially, like, do those surveys really, like, what do they actually do?
Yeah, that's the premise of my latest book too, is don't throw the survey out. And if you are in relationship with your team members enough to recognize when they are frustrated or stressed, you're going to be able to much more quickly respond than waiting a year to hear what your team members had to say, which is going to be a different experience a year from now than it was 6 months ago. So I'm in complete agreement. Toss the surveys out. They're not doing us any good, and you're wasting a lot of money.
Well, it's because, we're all human, right? So human have biases. So we all have a recency bias.
Yes.
So whatever day that survey drops on you, the answers you're going to get are all like, what just happened to me in the last 6 hours? Did
Absolutely.
my kid drive me crazy? Did, I get sick to my stomach? Did I have a great morning? Yeah. Is it raining outside? Like, people answer those surveys based on things that are totally outside of the survey. Because
100%.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we're just human. That's just how we do things, right?
Yeah, it's our human response. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, when I was in the corporate sector, I heard a lot of times, well, I'm waiting for the right moment to answer the survey. Oh, okay. What is the right moment? Yeah. So we have just a few more minutes left of our time today. I want to give you, make sure you have full opportunity to tell us how to find you, how to find your work. Thank you to the producer for putting the books up on screen so people can see those. But give us just a little bit more insight about where to find you and your great work.
Thank you. I mean, I try to communicate in different forms because everybody's different. So if you are a book reader like me, I'm a big nerd. I would pick up a copy of the book. You can get a paperback. Both books are on Amazon. If you like to listen to things, I would recommend that you could get the audiobook, or I have a lot of podcasts, lovely conversations like this. You can just Google my name, Jennie Byrne podcast, and it'll pop them all up. Just see what sounds interesting to you. You can fast forward me on 2x speed. I won't be offended. Or if you want to see me a little more personal in my videos, I have a YouTube channel. Again, search Dr. Jennie Byrne. This is my website that's popping up. LinkedIn is my only social media platform. That's a whole other conversation about why I only have one. But I am very open to random outreach. I will always respond to you. I may not be able to help you, but I'll help get you where you need to go. So just, connect, DM me on LinkedIn, and at some point I will be sure to get back to you. That's the best way to get a hold of me. And I mentioned a private practice as well. You can get there through the link on LinkedIn. That's really for people who are really feeling bad and feel like maybe they need more, either depression, anxiety, ADHD, something's like, beyond what a coach is going to be able to help you with. Like, you really need something a little bit more, or you're not sure. You think maybe you need something more. That's a good place to let me help you there too.
Fantastic. Well, and I can vouch for you do respond to DMs. That's how I found you. I think we were connected through a mutual contact. So you absolutely do respond. And yeah, Moral Injury is a fascinating read. And your Work Smart is on my list. It's been my 2 a.m. thought for about the last month. I need to order that book. And by the time I fall back to sleep and the morning comes around, I've forgotten about it again. But definitely will be ordering that. But yeah, and thank you so much for giving us those 3 definitions definitions of burnout, moral injury, and PTSD. That was very enlightening. And it has been a great pleasure to connect with you again and chat. And I hope we can continue conversations in the future. So I've got some additional research that I'm working on, and I'd love your insights on that as well. So
awesome. Well, thanks for the conversation. And I would just say, anyone out there listening, if you feel like something is wrong inside of you, you are not alone. Whatever is going on, there are people to help you. You know, whatever, if I can push you to just take that little step to research or to reach out, please, please do. You're not alone. You're not helpless. You're not hopeless. There are people out here who really want to help you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's such a great testament to understanding and knowing what our own personal values are as well. Because if we don't know what our personal values are, we're not going to know when they're being eroded or attacked or degraded. So thank you again for the great conversation. Really enjoyed it. And you can find the Compassion Project on the USA Global Television Network as part of YouTube. And thank you for being with us. Please stay tuned to hear a little bit from our sponsors, and I hope to see you next month. We're going to have another great guest, Seamus Corey, who is the Chief Wellbeing Officer, and we'll continue the conversation about institutionalized trauma and how we can move beyond it through a compassion evolution. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you next time.
5 Little Known Secrets for Dementia Caregivers with Tracy Cram-Perkins.
Hi there, I am Tracy Cram-Perkins, the host of the Dementia Home Care Show here on USA Global TV and Radio. I am also the author of the book of the same name. And you'll see this QR code. This is for an extended version of the same talk. So if you want to see the full hour-long version, feel free to scan the code and go to that website. Stick with me, we'll talk about 5 little known secrets to make it a little easier to do dementia caregiving. What you're seeing on the left-hand side is a healthy aged brain, age 55 and above. The one you're seeing on the right is an Alzheimer's disease brain. It is in moderate disease. It is shrinking. It has holes in it. The memories that were in those holes no longer exist. When you're learning something, let's say in kindergarten, you learn how to tie your shoelace. Well, then by the time you're in 2nd grade, your brain remembers that information from tying the shoelace and applies it so you can learn more quickly how to tie more complex knots. So the brain is hardwired to do this for us. So it helps us learn faster so it doesn't take us long to acquire knowledge. The brain is looking for the information and they pick the closest to wherever that hole is. Let's look at some tips that we can use to help do that.
These are 5 simple tools you can use as a dementia caregiver to help your loved one. The whiteboard is a useful tool in recording the day's activities and the answers to repetitive questions. The calendar clock is a very useful tool to orient your loved one on the day, the date, and the time, and remind them of upcoming appointments. The communication cards are a great tool to bridge the gap when they can no longer tell you what's wrong. And then there's the pill minder for when your loved one is still able to take pills but needs prompting. The final tool I want to share with you is the memory book. It tells your loved one's story. It's a great tool for distraction, redirection, also as a conversation starter, and telling you where they are in their story so you know how to answer their questions.
Music is probably the most powerful tool in your toolbox after laughter. Music is a way to maintain connection. It sticks with your brain longer than any other thing, including reading. When you're having an issue with somebody, you can play their favorite music if you move them to another room, something that makes them happy, or you can start singing songs together from their childhood. These are some of my favorite books for caregivers. My show airs on the 3rd Tuesday of every month, and you can view past episodes on YouTube. Thank you, everyone.
This program has been brought to you in part by Tracy Cram-Perkins. Connect with her and order her book at tracycramperkins.com. For more information about Alzheimer's disease, support resources, and how you can help, contact the Alzheimer's Association at 1-800-272-3900 or visit their website at www.alz.org. They offer 24/7 helpline support and a wealth of information to assist you and your loved ones.
We face daily cyber risks, spending over 7 hours of screen time, including 4.5 hours on mobile phones. This convenience comes with significant dangers, with cybercrime costs predicted to exceed $10.5 trillion by 2025. In 2023 alone, seniors lost over $3.4 billion to cybercrime. Our goal is to make social engineering concepts of cybersecurity easier to understand. We work with business teams, senior living facilities, investment companies, and educational institutions, both individually and in groups. We offer real-life examples to help you recognize and prevent attacks, with sessions available both in person, in selected regions, and remotely. Schedule your training session, or to learn more, contact us today. Call us at 847-845-9360. Email us at info@cybersecurityeasy.com. Protect your team and family with cybersecurityeasy.com.
My name is Dr. Felix Kravitz, and I am the founder of cybersecurityeasy.com, LLC. We live in a world full of vulnerabilities and cyber risks. We spend almost 4.5 hours a day on our mobile phones. It's over 7 hours of screen time daily when including computer use. We often forget that this convenience comes with risks. Published data predicts that the cost of cybercrime will exceed $10.5 trillion in 2025. These numbers encompass not only businesses, but also each one of us, including our children and our parents. In 2023, the FBI reported over $3.4 billion lost by seniors aged 60 and older. Cybersecurityeasy.com LLC's initiative is to massively support the community by providing cyber safety coaching and improving social engineering awareness. Our goal is to make social engineering concepts of cybersecurity easier to understand. We work with business teams, seniors, and educational institutions, both individually and in groups. We cover various topics from phone phishing attacks to AI-generated voice cloning, robocalls, password protection, and more using life examples. Talk to us today. Call us at 847-845-9360 or email us at info@cybersecurityeasy.com.